Welcome to the Sharpe Way. Another amazing Monday evening. I'm here again, 8 to 10, 2 glorious hours, the most important hours of your week. Yes, you must listen to all 2 hours. That is the rules. And I am very happy. I have tonight an amazing guest, a woman who I've known for a bit now. When I met her when I was running for governor of New York State. She is a personal friend of mine running for the tough district of New York 22, congressional candidate. Former congressperson, former assembly person, right? Is that correct?
That's correct.
The one, the only, Claudia Tenney.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming. You are in a tough district. It is not as, most people think of congressional districts as being totally gerrymandered. It's all red or all blue, and that's all. You don't have that.
Well, it's interesting that people like to say they're all gerrymandered, but in New York State, it's a little different because back in 2012, when we went through redistricting or reapportionment, whatever you want to call it, a federal judge determined the congressional lines because the Senate and the Assembly couldn't agree. So a federal judge determined the lines. It wasn't done by a political organization, technically, either the Democrats or the Republicans. So actually, the district isn't that bad. It's certainly not as bad as the Assembly district that I represented, which is now the 101st Assembly District. So if you ever want to take a look at that, that's 7 counties, 1 town wide, and longer than my congressional district, even though there's only 134,000 people in Assembly District 101, and there's over 700,000 people in the congressional district, which basically starts, on the edge of Lake Ontario and goes all the way to the Pennsylvania border, right in the center and the heart of central New York. So
you made a switch. You moved from Assembly to Congress. Yep. What made you make that shift?
Well, part of it was the district. Obviously, I went from this being in the minority in the Assembly. It was about 108 to 42 when I was in the state Assembly, which means we had 108 Democrats to 42 Republicans. I'm a Republican. It was very difficult to get anything done in the Assembly on the Republican side, at least at the time. Of course, the Senate was controlled by the Republicans, and it is not now.
Right.
But that was from 2011 through 2016. And I was just frustrated with dealing with the Assembly. It just seemed like a hopeless cause. I mean, there was never really any significant legislation passed in our House by Republicans since, you ready? 1974.
I believe it. I'm not shocked.
So, and the Democrats were really just not interested in what we had to say or what our views were, somewhat. I mean, it was all just, very anecdotal. Oh, I got a Republican on my bill, but it wasn't really serious because...
So it's almost like saying, look, I have one, so now I'm bipartisan.
Yeah, was all, bipartisan just gets thrown around like a buzzword when it's really not bipartisan. You throw people on your bills. What I used to do is totally take my name off a bill and find a like-minded Democrat to carry my bill so I could get it passed.
Ah, smart move.
So there's no pride and ownership in the Assembly back then. But part of the reason is I felt that I could do more in Congress, more to help my region. It was a very hopeless cause in some ways in the New York State side, especially with Governor Cuomo at the top and the way that we were turning.
Changed.
Yeah, and thank you for running.
Yes,
it's just a very difficult situation. So I got to Congress, and a very, very difficult path for me always. I mean, I had never been endorsed, even by the Republicans, as a candidate for office. My local Republican county did not endorse me before a primary. And I got elected in 2016 in a very tough year. I had a 3-way primary where both of my opponents outspent me. The one had $3 million, one had $300,000. And I had mostly my own money, about $200,000, but I was able to win. I then ran against 2 sort of, both claimed to be billionaires, but I think they weren't billionaires, but they could have been self-funding. They spent another 16 or 13 or 15 million on the race, and I was just drowned in a wash in negative ads, and I just had trouble competing. But I've always been an independent business owner, and I got in kind of on
tell me about your business.
Trump wave. That's how I got in.
Absolutely. Well, that was kind of the rebellion wave, wasn't it?
Yeah. Well, yeah, I got in under that. It was a 3-way race, but Trump won our district. By the way, Trump won it by 15 points, and Hillary. What am I saying? Romney had only won that same district by 1 point. So it was interesting. It was first time anyone in our region not getting endorsed was going to win on a major party line.
It's funny you said that. I'll do a quick side story if I could.
Yeah.
That is when there was a picture when I was running. Someone sent me a picture. There's a picture of a guy outside of his house. And outside of his house were 4 banners, right? One was the Confederate rebel flag. The next was the yellow "Don't Tread on Me" snake flag, the Gadsden flag, right? Yeah. The next was a Trump 2020 flag. And the next was a Larry Sharpe for governor flag, all along the same house. And people say, how in the world is that even possible, right? How does that even work? And I said, each of those in that person's mind is a symbol of rebellion. That's how, in that person's mind, he squares all those as the same.
Right.
Rebellion, 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 rebellion. I just don't want what's happening. I remember my media chief when I ran, I got him from the Bernie Bros. He ran Veterans for Bernie. And he came to me because it wasn't like he understood Bernie's policies, but he just wanted a rebel. And he saw Bernie as a rebel. And when the Democrats screwed Bernie out of the nomination in 2016, he was like, I just want a rebel. So he came to me because I was the rebel. So he just went for the rebel. And how about a third of the Bernie bros in 2016 actually voted for Trump in 2016 once Bernie left.
Right, independent voters. I mean, that's a lot of what they are rebel voters.
Yes.
And people don't see all those symbols the same way that they might see them in other areas. But it is interesting. Like Bernie Sanders actually won the primary in 2016 against Hillary Clinton in my district, in NY22 in upstate New York, which surprises a lot of people. But I actually have a lot of Democratic friends who voted for Bernie and then ended up voting for Trump. You know, they didn't want socialism, but they certainly didn't want corruption, which is Hillary Clinton.
Right. Yeah, no doubt. I mean, whether someone likes Hillary or not, they would always say the same thing. She is literally the establishment candidate. I mean,
it's establishment. Yeah.
There's no one more establishment than she is, right? I mean, so if you're anti-establishment, you're going to be anti-Hillary for sure. And Bernie is not the establishment. Well, now he's more the establishment now, I think.
Yes,
right. He's become more of it now.
Well,
but
he is kind of the establishment, and he's been elected to office and been in the establishment as an elected official for how many years?
Many.
I don't know how many years. Yeah. 30 anyway, right?
Absolutely. So, by the way, if you want to join the program, please pick up the phone, give us a call, 573-427-5463. Give us a buzz. I got off topic, but tell me about, I know you're an entrepreneur. Tell me about your business, please.
Great. Well, first of all, I was a lawyer. Mm-hmm. So I practiced law. I became a partner in my law firm after just a few years. And our family business was a newspaper and a printing company. So when I let my father got sick, he was a Supreme Court justice. He used to come to New York City a lot, do cases here, all over the state. He served 35 years. And I was a lawyer, I did everything, from family court to commercial real estate, residential real estate, estates, landlord tenant. I did everything, all the junk in our firm that I had to do to try to make money in a little town of Utica, New York, which is, was always struggling.
Is that where you spent most of your time, in the Utica area?
Well, I actually live across the street from the house I grew up in, which is New Hartford, but it's like basically my mailing address is Utica. It's like Utica, I could probably hit a golf ball into Utica.
Got it. Okay.
So it's right there. So our family was, I grew up there, still there. When my dad got really sick, I ended up taking over our family business at the time, which is in the late 90s. I left my firm, had kind of gone on my own, and then I just took over the newspaper business. And we had kind of like we had a long time running weekly newspaper called the Mid-York Weekly. It was in the Madison County area, and then we kind of expanded it. We had some Shoppers and Penny Savers, and I kind of converted them all into one because I wanted to make an alternative newspaper.
Did you actually stop practicing to do this?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
Mostly.
Wow. Okay.
I still had clients. I kept, a few just because there were some that just, they were hard to leave.
You kind of grandfathered them in.
Yeah, I kind of, and I did it when I could. I kept my license going. Didn't want to totally get out of it because I think it's useful in the end. If something ever happens, I can always practice law.
Sure.
But a lot of business law. But so what I did is I just kind of made it an independent newspaper because I know something long before Trump said fake news. I could see the news media was not telling the truth, even on a local level. Our daily newspaper, either they were maliciously trying to support the establishment. They claimed they weren't, but they were never really reporting what I thought was the news. And I would go to these events, like I'd go to the town board meetings, the village meetings, the county meetings. I'd run around all over and try to get all the
So
the
you
news
were being a
coverage I could.
reporter too.
I was a reporter, publisher, editor. I used to design the ads, sell the ads, did everything.
Wow.
I mean, we had to. It's small business. You
Sure.
got to do it all.
Absolutely.
And so I did all that, and I learned a lot. And I used to try to get student interns, like kids coming out of college, and they'd come over, and I go, this is before cell phones were as adaptable as they are now. It was in the late 90s, early 2000s. I just say, here's a camera. Here's a pad. Go get me a story. Go down to cover the county ledge. Go to the city meetings, and that's basically. I had a bunch of college kids who got a great opportunity to learn how to be reporters. It was fun. But it was always, constant turmoil.
Absolutely. So how does someone who's running a newspaper decide? You know what the answer is? Politics.
Oh,
How does that happen?
Well, that didn't just happen. So I was interested. Our newspaper, I could see the writing on the wall.
Sure.
I could see newspaper. Like I could see one of the things that we relied on our classified advertising.
Sure.
We even had like the singles advertising.
Sure.
We took those ads. We had a lot of the inserts that you put in the newspaper. We were trying to be really innovative. We didn't just sit on the shelf like a newspaper. We went to direct mail because we realized direct mail was the best vehicle for our customers to get past a lot of those national chain stores, whether it was the big box stores, to get directly to people because mail was a proven entity, which is, I'm a huge postal advocate. I think I think we need to preserve the post office, continue to make it efficient, but I don't think it's a constitutionally created entity, just like
Part
the
of the
Department of
Constitution.
Defense.
Absolutely.
So I'm a big postal fan. So we went direct mail, and it really helped us with our customers. But I could also see the writing on the wall as eBay and a lot of these companies started getting involved. I could see our classifieds going down, and we really were trying to find a way that we could deal with our surviving. And I would start selling to politicians, anyone, when you got to sell and you got to feed your payroll and you have a lot of people working for you and a lot of families. I'm trying to make payroll. I'm trying to pay the bills. I'm trying to cut costs. I'm trying to keep the business going. We did whatever we could. But then I could see that was probably the best solution. My dad passed away. Even though he wasn't in the business, my mother was nervous about where we were going, and we were in a pretty good place, so we decided to sell it.
Oh, nice. Okay.
And so we sold in 2004 the newspaper division, and we kept our printing division, which we still have today. But it was tough. I mean, I didn't really want to do that, but in the process of doing that, I ended up going and working for a member of the assembly who said, hey, you sold me a bunch of advertising. You did a good job.
Sure.
You helped me with my message, and I did it all. I kind of crafted their message. I used my expertise.
I used to sell ads myself. I did the same thing.
I did it all. I had to figure out, it's like anything I could do to sell, hey, you maybe ought to say this, or you ought to do that. Or
back in the day, I used to sell ads for WOR radio.
Oh, yeah.
I'm here in New York City, and I used to write the ads, and once in a while I'd do the ads here or there. Yes, I know exactly.
I used to write the ads up. I used to try to do creative. I did some great ads, I thought, but other people didn't appreciate them as much as I did, maybe. But you learn the hard way.
Sure.
But so I started working. I worked part-time for an assemblyman who was in office at the time, and when he retired, he just said, "Oh, you should run for my seat." This was in 2010. So I ran for the New York State Assembly in 2010, and the Republican establishment didn't like me because, honestly, in my newspaper, I tried to tell the truth about both sides. My function, I thought, my grandfather founded this newspaper, was to try to really be the fourth estate, to really be the watchdog of government, not the lapdog, which is what the news tend to do. Make sure to hold our politicians accountable, whether they're Republican or Democrat. And quite honestly, in my region, they were mostly Republican. And so probably they were like,
so someone got mad at you because you said stuff.
You can't be criticizing us, we're Republicans. I'm like, well, you're not actually doing your job. But, I criticized everybody equally, but we gave them all a fair shot, whether they wanted to write letters or do editorials and so, it came time for me to run. And, of course, it wasn't my turn. In our area, the musical chairs stopped and there was no chair. I took somebody's chair. So there was no chair for me. And, the political musical chairs. And I ended up defeating our Republican county chairman to win my seat in the state assembly. So it was a tough battle. And then, of course, we had redistricting in 2012, and then they created this crazy district to try to get rid of me. I mean, I started in New Hartford, and my constituents were all the way down in Orange County.
Wow, sure.
You know,
sure.
If you look at my district, it's 101. Go look up online. You can see Assembly District 101, New York. It's insane.
Right.
It's, I think, the longest district ever created, and that was intended to get rid of me. But I fought hard. I went door to door. I tried to continue to tell the truth, and we prevailed. And then I ended up just like literally, it was just costing me so much money to do this district because what people don't understand, when you're in the state assembly, you get reimbursed for your mileage to and from Albany one time during a session week. But when I have to go drive to Delhi, Otsego, Orange, Ulster, Sullivan County every single day, all that mileage and gas in those days was about $3 or $4 a gallon. All of that I had to pay for myself. And because I was such a minority member as in the Assembly as a Republican, it's very hard to raise any money because the lobbyists give all the money to the Democrats.
I
and so
know
I had
the
to
feeling as I crossed New York State in 2018.
You see what it is.
Yes.
I mean, I was spending
I get it completely.
$600-$700 a month just on gas, just to get to my constituents to serve them.
Mm-hmm.
And it wasn't like I was, people don't understand things are different. And that was before they all gave themselves a nice pay raise and changed everything around. It was when it was things were different. But that's how I got into politics in this kind of, it really wasn't like something I'd always wanted to do. I wasn't one of those people that always wanted to. And by the way, I was almost 50 years old. So when
you had been around the block once or twice.
Yeah, I wasn't like some, I remember somebody said, oh, she's a career politician. I'm like, how am I a career politician? When I had a career as a lawyer, I ran our newspaper, Family Business, which I still am involved in very much so now.
But the print side, you're saying?
The newspaper, then we sold it, and then I continue to keep the rest of our entities, which are our family business. So it's like, it's funny, I still really passionately believe in helping our small business community. They're the heart of our country, heart of our job creators.
So hold on, this is great. You just brought something that I wanted to bring up anyway, so let's talk about that now. How in the world does a congressperson help small businesses? I mean, that's actually hard because, right, how do you help someone as one of 435 people? How are you able to help, right? I mean, if you're a local mayor, right, if you're a local city council, it seems easier for you to hands-on help a small business out. But how does someone, when you're one of 435, in this case, literally going, hundreds of miles to D.C., how do you help the small business person?
Well, the biggest thing that we can do is not have local governments do everything. The biggest thing that we can do is cut taxes, cut unnecessary regulations, treat everyone equally, give everyone the same opportunity to be an entrepreneur and be successful. All this cronyism and huge government spending to help, to help out your competitors or whoever you're involved with in your business sector, whatever it is. It's about clearing the path, getting government out of the way, and giving people a chance, making sure government does what it's supposed to do, provide safety, making sure that everybody in the marketplace and all the actors are following the rules, but make sure we've got lower taxes, lower regulations. I mean, reasonable regulations, and minimize regulations. We brought a business entrepreneur with me here, so she knows. But people don't realize, I mean, this is why it was so passionate to me. Like, I would watch these politicians when I was a business owner, and when I had our printing company, one of the things, this is an example of what I used to, I'd have salespeople come and they go, we want to sell you this great piece of equipment. It's a press. It's called a quad stack. You can do top quality 4-color for your business people that you're selling to, that with your whether it's printable items, whether it's items that are going to go in the newspaper, you can put your newspaper out, it'll be beautiful. And I was thinking, how can we do this? I need to find a way that I can get some help, maybe some people to come work in our business. Mm-hmm. Well, I'd go talk to politicians. They're like, basically, we don't have any interest in you because you're too small.
All the time.
They always want to deal with just the big. They want the big fat cats who are going to give a bunch of money.
They want Amazon to come in, and they don't care about the local business around them.
Right.
I think it's common.
So I was struggling with that. And one of the things that really bothered me, that I don't think people realize, as a small business owner, how much it impacts a small business owner when you're competing in the marketplace and all of a sudden government comes in and helps your competitor with money and says, we're going to take care of your competitor. And that actually happened to me. I was running our newspaper. We put this huge investment to go direct mail into, for example, my town, which was like New Hartford, New York. And we had 11,000 direct mail pieces into this. And the reason I'm telling you this is what happened. The local government decided there was another newspaper that was the so-called New Hartford paper, and they weren't direct mailed, but they were only reaching about 7,000 people. So they decided to give them a grant and extra money so they could reach the 11,000 that I was already reaching.
Wow.
And I was like, this is a subsidy. I'm
Yes,
already paying.
absolutely.
I'm already paying for this.
Where's your money?
Where's my money? Why are you
Exactly,
giving money
yes.
to them? And that's when
Absolutely.
it was my first realization of how harmful it is when government takes taxpayer money and helps out a competitor over another. And I fought this thing tooth and nail and I didn't win, but we had to fight to be better because meanwhile, my competitor got to have all this great subsidies from government. So that's one of the first things I realized was like, I was
So
like,
that's
this is
one of
unfair.
your big things is reducing regulation to allow the small business owner to survive.
Right,
better.
but also stopping government from interfering in the marketplace and giving advantages to one over another. Like, you mentioned Amazon. Why are we giving taxpayer money to Amazon?
I completely agree. I'm glad we didn't do it.
Yeah, why are we
I'm
giving
glad we
money?
didn't.
Amazon should come in. We should roll back needless regulations. And make
Amazon
sure they
should pay to come to us.
Exactly.
There's literally 8.5 million people in this city, 16 million people in the metro area. New York City is a mecca for talent, particularly female talent. There's so much awesome talent here. You want talent? You want cool people who work here? You should be paying us. You should pay us to come here.
Absolutely.
Otherwise, what are we doing? So I'm going to grab a call if I can.
All right, great.
Let me grab a call if I could. We're going to grab some from New York. People here from all over the country, but we'll do a New Yorker. This is Danny. How are you, Danny?
Hi, Larry. How are you doing?
What's going on, brother?
I'm listening to the show. You and Claudia talking. Just wanted to call in and talk to you, ask you guys about the Democrats right now.
Okay.
The 2020 race.
You mean the presidential race?
Yes, and local, because I know Claudia is running for 22nd district.
You're running against Brindisi, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Brindisi is her competitor in her race. Yep.
Claudia, just know I'm not a fan of Brindisi.
Where are you from? Are we
The
allowed
20th Congressional
Oh,
District.
20th. Okay.
Yep, so Tonko is my representative.
Okay.
Taxing Tonko right now. So, anyways.
What's your question,
about
brother?
the
Tell me.
presidential race. So, the presidential race.
Okay.
Do you guys think it's obviously apparent the establishment is screwing Bernie again?
In my view, yes. Now, I don't have proof of this, but it looks like it to me. Why do a bunch of them all of a sudden decide to stop right before Super Tuesday and support Biden? And then why does Warren, the only one who would take votes away from Bernie, not drop? It seemed like the perfect storm. Now, is it possible it's coincidence? It's possible, but I don't think it's realistic. I think they actually wanted to make sure that Bernie did not do well on Super Tuesday, and I think that was purposely done for Biden to take a leap and all of a sudden become the front runner. I think it's exactly what I was talking about before. I think the establishment wants Biden to be the nominee. I don't know, Claudia, you think I'm wrong?
I think you're right. It does seem like the establishment got in the way. The coincidence of everybody dropping out to make sure Biden could get over the top, and then coincidentally, we're saying this, Elizabeth Warren doesn't get out, who's the person absorbing all those votes that could have gone to Bernie for Bernie to win. And then I thought it was interesting. I saw this on Twitter, so I saw the clip. It was hard to see, but Amy Klobuchar, or Senator Klobuchar, was at an event and she sort of made it imply that she's glad to join the Biden ticket. So was she promised a vice presidential?
Not a bad deal. If I'm Biden, I wouldn't mind doing that.
But
I'd make that deal.
she was kind of crying, it looked like, when she said, she goes, and I'm suspending my campaign to support Joe Biden. And I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but it looked like she didn't look very happy about that. Or maybe she was just emotional. I don't know. But
look, if Democrats want to win the Midwest, Klobuchar is not a bad VP pick.
No, not a bad pick. And
Right,
she's
not
a
bad
woman.
pick. She's a woman. Absolutely. She's younger than Biden. So not a bad deal. So anyway, Danny.
Everybody's younger than Biden.
That's also true. Yes. That's true. Everyone's younger
My
than Biden.
God, Trump's the youngest guy running.
That's right. Yes. Trump's a spring chicken. Yes. So did I answer your question, Danny?
Yes.
Did you have something else you want to bring up?
Well, yeah, I just wanted to add to the conversation. So
Go ahead.
I think that if Biden or Sanders get the nomination, they have to fit their narrative identity politics. And I think it's going to have to be a female and a woman of color because that's the way I think the left is pushing the narrative for the party right now.
So you think it's like Kamala Harris or someone like that?
Absolutely, because she comes out and endorses him yesterday, and then you see Jesse Jackson endorse Sanders. So obviously,
yeah,
there's
right.
there's a rift between the left and then the so-called political establishment for the Democrats.
Okay.
And
Maybe.
I just think, look, if Bernie's gonna stand a chance, he's got to attack Biden on everything. He should be aggressive, not fucking call him his friend.
Well, tomorrow's going to be the issue, right? Tomorrow's Super Tuesday too, right? So if Bernie gets his derriere handed to him, that might be the end of him. But if Bernie wins, well, different ball game. Different ball game.
Yeah,
absolutely.
with Elizabeth Warren out. What are the Super Tuesday states tomorrow?
I don't know. It's like, I think 9 tomorrow. Is that right?
Michigan, Mississippi, Missouri, North Dakota, Idaho, and Washington State.
Oh, okay.
Danny is not playing games. He did his homework.
He did. Thank
Did
you.
his homework, yes.
Well, yeah, because
absolutely.
if Biden sweeps, it's over for Bernie.
That's true. Yeah. If Biden sweeps it, the ball game's over. It's true. Yeah, he's got to walk away. Very true. So you wanted to talk about other Democrats too, or was that the only one?
No, because I was gonna ask Claudia about her race locally and how she's making groundwork. How's the campaign going?
It's going well. ClaudiaForCongress.com, by the way.
There we go.
Larry has advised me to make sure I say it a number of times. ClaudiaForCongress.com if you want to help us out.
Whenever you come on my show, I want you to pump yourself, so please do it. Yes.
Yeah, I think it's going really well. I think that we are... I think that the issue of impeachment is big in my district. Mm-hmm. It might be really popular here, but it's not popular in a Trump district where I am. Where Trump, again, anti-establishment, kind of independent-looking guy. People still like him. I think he's polling very well in my district, even higher than he is the rest of the nation. And that impeachment, I think, is going to be a ball and chain for Brindisi, though they're trying to minimize it, and he's trying to get away from it. Even as we get closer to November and memories fade a little bit, I still think it's a ball and chain when you try to say, oh yeah, I work with the president, but you voted to impeach him. And by the way, the important factor here is that people need to understand something. Let's just be brutally honest. Impeachment has been a very lucrative business for the Democrats. They made a fortune off of impeachment. I think a lot of them, and this is my theory on Brindisi, why would you vote for impeachment in a district that supports the president, even now? A district that's doing well because of the tax cuts, a district that's doing well because of the regulations being reduced that are unnecessary. Why would you vote for that? Well, number one, you want to make a lot of money so you can smear your opponent, which is really helpful, and to build a really strong team so you can go out and really overwhelm like they did last time. They had so much money. And secondly, I think for a guy like Brindisi, who is actually one of the most left-wing members of the state assembly, he was actually tied with the most left-wing members from New York City. He's not some moderate, as he likes to say, upstater. He actually has a very left-wing voting record, and he has a very left-wing voting record in Congress now.
So your district
he's actually left of AOC, believe it or not.
So your district is a pro-Trump district.
Yes, it's a pro-Trump. But so Danny, I think things are going to be tough for him to try to sell that he's a moderate when he's not. And you look at his record, for upstate New York to vote and for a late-term abortion and continue to support it. He voted against the Born Alive bill. On Medicare for All, he's co-sponsored that. And then when he was running in the campaign with me in 2018, he was like, well, I support it only for New York State, but I don't support it for the rest of the country. Well, how can you take that?
For those of you who are listening who aren't in New York State, you may not realize that we are a very diverse state, and upstate New York is very different than New York City. In New York City, the vast majority of New York City people do not like Trump at all. The vast majority were pro-impeachment, the vast majority. But you go upstate, and it's a big difference. You find a lot of districts that are very different. It's very much city versus rural in that regard.
Yeah, definitely. And so I want to address one thing on that, too, as well. So the interesting thing, and very much as Larry described earlier, a rebel type of area, upstate New York, we always feel like we're the ugly stepchild compared to New York City. But, so I'm concerned. I mean, I think one of the reasons Brindisi was concerned is that if he doesn't vote for impeachment, he certainly doesn't want to be the only Democrat in the state of New York to vote against impeaching this president who's very unpopular in the city areas. So his future in politics would be better voting to impeach, even if he's not in Congress. His future would be going back to the state somehow and being elevated there, because this is kind of, if he voted against it, it'd be kind of a ceiling for him and politically, and he's still a young guy. So I think that's part of it. But back to the rebel issue, I mean, I think the issue with Trump, I think a lot of people, certainly in our area, may not like the way he tweets, some of the stuff he does, but they do see him as the alternative to the establishment, which doesn't seem to be working for us in New York State.
Got it. Okay, good. Danny, how was that?
It was awesome.
There we go.
And Claudia, I just wanted to point out that a lot of Republican females are running for congressional races locally, especially here in the 20th and the 18th, because I know Che Farley's challenging Maloney, and Delgado's got a businesswoman challenger. So, but you don't hear the media focus on, Republican women running, but because they're more focused on women that running on the Democrat side. It's such a bizarre thing.
Right. No, you
Any
got
thoughts on that?
Liz Joy. If they're not talking about her, she's running against Tonko. You're talking about Shel Farley running against Sean Patrick Maloney. And by the way, Sean Patrick Maloney is in the 18th district, and I represented 2 towns in the assembly with him, believe it or not, all the way down in Orange County. And yeah, there are women. We have more women than ever. Elise Stefanik has kind of led the way. She's is supported and endorsed us, her Elise PAC. She's getting attacked all the time for being a millennial woman. And a lot of it is hard to be a woman Republican or even conservative. There's just entrepreneur. Like, look at me, I got all the strikes against me. I'm an entrepreneur. I'm a business owner. I'm a lawyer. I'm a woman. I'm a mother of a Marine, which is why we love Larry, because he's a former Marine. And so it's there's a lot of those things that a lot of suburban women don't like. They tend to be more left-leaning, I think, but I don't know about that. My son didn't play soccer, so I was a basketball, swimming mom. So my son was really tall. He's still tall. He's 6'5" now. So we did baseball too, but I think that a lot of women want security. They want safety. And I know I cared about a lot of those things with my son. And I think people are worried about what's going on. And I think one of the big factors that people are not necessarily focusing on is not just the national issues where women are faring better economically, just like everybody else. But I think the security issues, the bail reform issue, which was well-intentioned but isn't turning out well, especially in upstate New York, and some of the criminal justice reforms. I mean, as a woman, if I had a daughter and the thought that if she got raped in my home and the rapist could come back and take pictures and hang around my house, which is something that's allowed. I know that's sort of an outlier example, but these types of things don't look like safety and security to a woman who's raising children in a rural area or a suburban area in upstate New York.
So that's a great, thank you, Danny.
Yeah.
I appreciate
that. Thank you,
Dan.
All right, take care, guys.
I have a couple questions from the internet, and it's 3 in a row that are all about Second Amendment.
Okay.
I know you support the Second Amendment. One of them is, are you? That's a loaded question. I'll scratch that one. Okay. What types of guns should citizens be allowed to own, and how do you think they should be regulated in your perfect world?
Well,
looking at the national level, obviously.
Right. I mean, look at the Second Amendment says your right to bear arms shall not be infringed. It's not very subtle. It's not very nuanced.
Generally speaking, most people who are anti-gun will say well-regulated militia, right? That's always their comeback is, well, the militia should be well-regulated. Yeah, so they'll always come back with that.
But if you go back and you actually read your history of why the Second Amendment was started and you look at the Virginia documents and how we got it, the militia means the citizens.
Yes.
It does not mean the police. And a lot of people don't have that the right way. Look, no lawful gun owner wants to see anyone have access to guns who can't responsibly handle them, be safe, be trained. But it is a self-defense issue. Now, in New York City, your cops can get to a scene in a matter of minutes.
Yep.
If you're out in a rural area,
I'm not always happy about that.
I'm thinking about my guest here, Rita, with me. She lives a long way in the middle of the country from any kind of police. If somebody came to her house and she was limited in how she could defend herself, and she's She's an accomplished person in shooting, and we do sporting clays together and some other fun stuff. And she's accomplished at that. And if she didn't have her own, if she lives alone, if she didn't have access to be able to protect herself, which is the point of the Second Amendment, she could be killed in her own house. And I think a lot of people don't really totally understand that when you come from New York City.
Does that mean, in your view, that she should be able to have an assault weapon, or is that too far? Right?
Well, define an assault weapon. An assault, you know what we say an assault weapon is? Once you define my hunting rifle as an assault weapon, then you're going to take it away from us. So, I mean, what is an assault weapon?
Let's
find the
go
definition.
with what Beto said, right? Beto says he wants to take away your AR-15s and your AKs, right? Do you agree, disagree? Don't care.
I don't see anything wrong with everyday civilians. One of the most commonly used firearms is an AR-15. It's because a lot of people in the military understand how to operate them safely. They know how to use it. They can clean it. They can fix it.
M16A2 was for when I was in the Marine Corps. Absolutely.
Exactly. So you're a Marine. My son is a big advocate as a Marine and very safe. I mean, I honestly, when you are around people who are responsible with guns, the safety level is what I find the most incredible about them. If you go to a gun range, like Rita and I are a member of a number of gun ranges, incredible safety. I mean, people just need to understand that. And I get it. My sister is terrified of guns. But if I took her out to a range, and before you even go near the range, you learn how to handle a gun properly before we even let you. We're not going to let you out there if you're not going to handle it safely.
I taught my wife how to shoot.
Yeah, and a lot of women love it. I mean, there's a group that I don't know if Rita shoots in this group, but it's called Grits. Girls really into shooting. So like it's fun. But anyway, I do think, having civilians on the ground with an AK-47 with a fully automatic weapon probably isn't, I don't have a problem with licensure and people making sure they meet qualifications to have some of these things. I'm all for background checks. I think, people that, especially if somebody's not going to meet that standard, but I think sometimes the standard is ridiculous. I live in Oneida County, New York, and there are, most people cannot get an unrestricted concealed carry license, and for no reason. If my son came in and wanted to get an unrestricted concealed carry license, he's an active duty Marine. He can't purchase guns in Pennsylvania and go into New York State as an active duty Marine because of the waivers aren't there, and so there has to be reasonableness and common sense. And
you use the buzzword common sense.
It's just common sense.
You just scared libertarians when you say common sense, because when we hear common sense gun control, we hear
I'm not talking about common sense gun control.
Okay, good.
I don't mean common sense gun control. I think there are some. Look, the First Amendment is not completely unlimited. You can't defame, slander somebody with malice, especially a public standard. The New York Times standard for public officials is malice. There's a lot of those cases popping up right now.
You can't yell fire in a theater, right?
Right. There's certain limitations. And but I do think when it comes to protecting yourself and you choose the suitable weapon for where you live and where you need, I just think that to assume that people don't have the discretion to be able to do that, we live in a free society, and we need to preserve that.
Okay, let's go back to the phones if we could. Going back to New York again. We're going to grab Clark from New York. The last guy wants to talk about Democrats. This guy wants to talk about Republicans. Clark, how are you?
Good. How you doing, Larry?
I'm doing great. Talk to me, my friend.
First of all, I'm from Canastota. I was in Claudia's district, and first off, I'd like to say that I voted for her. I'm sorry she lost, but I love that she's so accessible.
Claudia,
thank you, Clark. I appreciate that.
You're winning.
Canastota, home of the International Boxing Hall of Fame.
I talked to you during a town hall. I actually asked you to endorse Larry with this, and you said you would look into it for me. But I guess my question is, anytime Larry has a Republican on, I have to ask this question. I don't want to group you in with the group, but since you're on, it seems to me that that's why I kind of went toward the Libertarian Party, that the Republican Party just isn't for small government anymore. And even under Trump, the deficit is increasing, the size of government's increasing, and they just seem to blame the Democrats, vice versa, two-party system.
No, I like what you're saying, Clark, and let me, if I could, I do hear that often, Claudia. I hear it often that
he's right.
Trump definitely, got the economy going, got it, but the deficit went with it, right? The deficit just went boom, right? Good economy, also big deficit. And where he was supposed to cut deficit too. Supposed to cut deficit, supposed to cut our debt. He was supposed to cut both. He hasn't cut deficit or debt. The government is getting bigger.
Yeah, let me first say, Clark, thank you so much for saying and telling the truth about me having town halls. I had numerous town halls. I had numerous coffees, and we started because the town halls were filled with people just screaming at me, and a lot of people really couldn't get their voices heard. We moved to we did town halls on just opioids or just with veterans or just with seniors. And so people could actually access me and talk to me without having them scream about impeaching Trump or whatever the indivisible resist movement wanted to talk about the whole time. So thank you for recognizing that, because my opponent still gets up and says that I never had a town hall, even though they have all this footage of me at town halls that they use in their commercials. So thank you for pointing out that fallacy that hopefully will dispel, because even Republicans believe it. So I'm a fiscal conservative, and I'm concerned about the debt and deficit as well. It's a huge problem. But when we were in Congress, we as Republicans had a hard time coming together. We had so many factions in the Congress, just in the House of Representatives. We had all the different groups. We had the liberals, the conservatives, and the rest of us, and everybody all in kind of splicing around, which is a good thing. It's a diverse group of people. But the problem is that in order to get anything passed in the House, you have to get through the Senate and get to the president. So we have to make compromises along the way. We finally came up with a way that would cut the debt and the deficit over time, because the biggest problem with the federal debt and deficit is the mandatory spending side.
Yes,
and,
absolutely.
And if you look at it by comparison, it's like a bucket of water and a drop of water. The mandatory side, we've got to start. That is where the juice and the meat of this problem is. And everybody focuses on the discretionary side, which is where we have some control, but really doesn't make that much dent. So we had a mechanism in place when we put forth the budget in 2017, and it was part of the American Health Care Act. And we had it. We struggled with it. The first try didn't work. We came back with a second try, which wasn't perfect. It was better. I will say it was better. It was not great. There were problems with it. We fought for our parts of it. We got it to the Senate. John McCain came out of retirement, came in from Arizona, let the bill get to the floor with great hope and anticipation. We thought we're finally going to, at least start chipping away at the debt and deficit, trying to solve the problem of Obamacare. And then John McCain gave us one big thumbs down, which was very disappointing for all of us. And, God rest his soul. I mean, he was a person that served our country in uniform, and we are, honor him for that. But unfortunately, this was just really hurt us, and we weren't able to recover, and we are still suffering under Obamacare right now. The Democrats keep saying, stop criticizing Obamacare, and it'll work. It's not working, and we need to fix it, and we need to...
But you brought up a very big point, right? Some of the biggest chunks of the budget are Medicaid, Medicare, Social Security, defense spending. These are the big chunks that most of the time, to your point, where we can do discretionary issues, but that's not really going to change anything. We've got to hit the big pieces. Right. Is there a way? Now, obviously, you're not, superwoman. You're not going to walk in and just make everything change. But how does someone like you, again, being one of 435, how can you begin to make that push? To Clark's point, how can we start to make that happen till we start touching the meat of it, right? Not just the discretionary funds.
Right. You have to chip away at it. So I am, as a conservative, I want to go in and I want to build Rome in a day and have it all done. I want to go in and do one vote and it's over. But unfortunately, you can't. We have a collaborative form of government. We have to struggle with the Senate side. We have to worry about getting Republicans elected. We tried to do all those things, and look what happened. The Democrats raised so much money, they slaughtered us, and we lost 41 seats. And now look what we have. In a way, the do-nothing Congress, at least they can't destroy the good that we did get done in the 115th Congress, which is really, they say, one of the best Congresses in over 30 years. But we still were 2 steps forward, 1 step back, 2 steps forward, a half step back. I mean, we're still struggling. And I think the president would like to do that. And he always says, how do we get through the government? So guess what? We go through a shutdown, and the Democrats blame everything on Trump. They blame everything on Trump. And so we're in a situation where if the Democrats would just join on board with us and recognize and care about the debt and deficit, they certainly don't care about the debt and deficit when they're in power, and it seems that both sides are like that. But let me tell you something. For people that have not sat in a Republican conference like I have in the majority, it is a brawl over the debt and deficit. We want to cut the debt and deficit, but unfortunately, it's just the Senate is so hard to get things through. We came up with great bills and you just get slam dunked. So you have to go in and compromise. And that's why it's frustrating. But there's nothing wrong with that. People just need to be patient. And one of the biggest frustrations I have is Republicans and conservatives, maybe even libertarians, we tend not to have the patience. The Democrats always win on process. They don't win on policy, and they play the long game. They're willing to take short-term losses to win down the road, and that's how they've been able to defeat us. I mean, if you just look at all the policy positions they take, they're able to sit there and wait.
So, Clark, is that answering your question or no?
Well, I mean, trust me, I definitely blame the Democrats. It's just that you would think the Republican Party would be the more conservative. And I might be wrong. I don't know everything about government, but doesn't Mr. Trump have to sign these huge spending bills? I mean, can he not spend them if he doesn't agree with them?
Well, this is a valid point, right? I mean,
he
Trump did
but
say
then,
he was not going to, and then he did.
Remember what we did? We went through 2 government shutdowns in 17 and in 18 into 19. Remember the big government shutdown where Nancy Pelosi famously decided to fly and go off to Afghanistan with this huge entourage, and Trump said, I'm grounding your plane. Mm-hmm. You need to stay here and get this thing done and negotiate so that we can get these government workers back to work and that type of thing. So, yeah, I mean, the government shutdown is part, and unfortunately, that's the way it goes. But I will say to you, Clark, one of the key things that a lot of people don't realize is that in 2017, for the first time in, I think, a decade, we actually, in the House of Representatives, under the control of the Republicans, we passed a balanced budget, 12 appropriations bills on regular order without having to go through the so-called continuing resolution process. We did it. And it got to the Senate and got all gummed up and came back because we didn't have enough Republicans in the Senate. Remember, we lost the seat in Alabama, and then we tried to win some seats back. So, I think we're struggling to get there, but sometimes, you got to get your head bashed in. I mean, look what happened in my seat. My fiscal conservatism didn't take I lost my seat because Brindisi went around and told everybody that I voted to take their health care away, which I didn't. I supported pre-existing conditions and all these bills that they accused us of, but they ran these cookie cutter campaigns across the nation, and people, were not informed because we have a terrible media that is all in outrage all the time about Trump and not really informing the people about what's really happening. Okay,
Clark, was that a good answer?
Oh yeah, and I don't personally. I like Claudia, and I voted for her, and I support her, and she is very accessible, and if
I'm just glad you voted for me. That's all I care about.
I definitely vote for you, Larry, and I try to get Claudia to endorse you, too.
Thank you, brother. I appreciate it.
By the way, Clark, just so you know, I've only endorsed 2 people for office ever.
See that? Only 2.
Well, I mean,
hopefully next time.
I was just impressed you took my question.
There we go. Oh, good.
Yeah, thank you. No, we appreciate it. Call in, and actually, you can call me when we get back into town. I drive through Canastota all the time.
Thank you, Clark. I appreciate it.
Nice. All right.
All right. There's another question. This is off topic. This is a question from the internet. Should sex work be decriminalized?
I'm sure the libertarians aren't going to like this answer, but I, as a mom, I feel like I just don't think it's going to lead down the right path for children to have to be involved in, especially young people. I mean, I think it's something that's going to leave more human trafficking, more people susceptible to that. So the way that it looks to me, I've witnessed a lot of human trafficking in my life, and with people with human trafficking, I championed against human trafficking in the Assembly with bills with Amy Paulin and also in the House of Representatives. I'm concerned about children and people getting caught up in this industry. I just think, a sex industry is just something I can't support.
Don't we have it, though, with pornography?
Yeah, but that's different. I think that's with adults. Pornography, you're talking about sex trafficking, sex meaning prostitution.
Saying is, to be clear,
you're talking about prostitution, actual physical act versus reading pornography.
No, I'm the people who are in the porn industry, right, are literally having a sexual act for money. Now, the way they get around it, the law is, right, if If some woman wants to have sex and she has sex with me and I pay her, that's prostitution.
Right.
But if you have a production company, we have sex and you pay her, it's not prostitution. That's pornography. It's different. I'm not paying her to have sex.
Pornography is
The production company is paying her to have sex with me, right? So that is no longer prostitution. That is now pornography, right? Plus pornography also is freedom of speech. That's the piece behind pornography. Pornography is a legal industry, right? Prostitution is not. So if a woman literally if a woman has sex on camera, man and woman have sex on camera, then that's legal, right? As long as the production company's paying her, that's legal. But if the individual pays that person to have sex, that's prostitution. That's illegal. Both of them can go to jail. The idea of sex work being decriminalized would mean that prostitution would be the same as pornography, meaning that you still have to be 18 years or older to be involved in it. There would still be transactions back and forth, which are business transactions, right? There would be no need in theory, there'd be no need for sex trafficking because it would be available in the market. You could just go to a brothel, you could call someone up, you can go back to a back page and say, hey, I would like my sex worker to come over. Sex work could be prostitution. Sex work could be strippers, could be dominatrix, could be huggers for people who have disabilities. Insert thing here, right? That is why sex work is a larger, category. Mm-hmm. That's the concept. Does it matter if it changes your opinion? I'm asking, just letting you know it's a clearer picture.
Well,
does that change your
opinion?
opinion?
It's more broad than I've never really thought about it that much that way.
Libertarians do think of sex work as a larger industry, which is why you rarely hear libertarians use the word prostitution. Here or there, but it's very rare. Most libertarians will use the phrase sex work, sex workers.
I don't know. The idea of, I understand it's legal. I just think about children and being involved in that industry. I just think human trafficking just seems to be a byproduct of that.
But human trafficking, as a general rule, there is very little human trafficking in pornography, with the exception of child porn, which is illegal.
Human trafficking is people, using or paying. They could be adults,
Sure.
And almost like saying you can pay for somebody to go and have sex with someone else. I don't know. As someone who is maybe unwittingly caught up in this, as a young person or a young, male or female, in many cases, especially, I just think about it being. I don't know. I just don't.
Mm-hmm.
I don't. I guess I, from a libertarian perspective, I can see where you would support it, but I feel like it's almost going down a slippery slope.
The libertarian view is your body.
I don't know. What do you think about it?
I think it should be decriminalized. Of course, absolutely. I think if you decriminalize sex work, well, what will happen, has happened in countries who've done it, is initially there'll be a little bit of disruption. That's how it usually works. But after that disruption, what usually happens is almost all human trafficking, immediate decrease because it's no longer illegal. Therefore, it's no longer lucrative. Once the black market doesn't...
Where's that example of that happening?
The Netherlands. Right? The Netherlands is the human trafficking much lower. There's human trafficking everywhere. Don't get me wrong.
Right, there is. There's
everywhere.
more now than ever.
Absolutely everywhere. But the countries that have the least amount of it are those who legalize it. If you look at women, and this is specifically women, there are a lot of people who are gay and trans who are also in that industry. But when you look at women, that's what we have data on. We don't really keep much data on the GSM. GSM stands for, by the way, gender and sexual minorities. Right. So the GSM community, we don't have much data on them because the government doesn't keep that much data on them. But they keep a lot of data on women, right? Because we arrest them, we put them in jail, we regulate them in Nevada. So there's more data on that. When women go into the illegal or underground sex working world, the prostitution world, almost always the only way out is prison or death. That's pretty much the only two ways they get out. Prison, death. When they go into the legal, which is Nevada, which is not a great system, but better than criminal, women who go into those fields or into escort services on their own, statistically, they come out better financially, physically, emotionally, in every way, shape, and form because they control their destiny. There's no requirement to have a pimp. There's no requirement for violence. There's no requirement for all those things. They're safer. It's better. The reality of it is, I believe, this is my opinion, if you're going to go into that field, why wouldn't I want you to be as safe as I could possibly have you?
Well, we had a bill, the state assembly, which actually minimized the criminalization of women who are victims in whether you want to call it prostitution, because they tend to be more victimized in that because there's a power
Sure.
issue, especially now. So
Particularly if they have
from
the
that
pimp.
perspective, especially for
Yep.
women who are caught up in this. So
Correct.
I guess it's a more sophisticated corporation, business somewhere else that I'm just not familiar with. And obviously it's maybe less so than a lot of maybe men would be, since I tend to be like I'm a 59-year-old woman. It's not exactly something I think, well, I don't think I have any saleable items, to be honest. So I don't think anybody wants to be with a 59-year-old.
Who knows, right? Who knows?
Yeah.
Yes, who knows?
It's not one of my strengths.
There we go. So, yeah, that's a very libertarian point I wanted to bring
Right.
up.
Can I ask something?
Go ahead, please.
So,
No, well, please put the microphone to your face.
so you would agree women 18 and older when you say legalize prostitution?
100%.
I'm just saying the age.
Absolutely,
18
100%.
and older.
In my personal view, I would prefer if the industry would only accept 21 and older. That would give actually women an opportunity to work first before they got into the sex worker industry. But I wouldn't want to have a legal reason of doing that. I think the industry, I would hope it would, if we could put enough pressure on the industry itself to decide to accept 21 older, because I think it's safer as a general rule, because, you know, medically, no one, men and women, don't mature as much until they're in their 20s. So I'd prefer them, because still to this day there's a stigma. If you get into the sex working industry, that's going to have a stigma in your life. Some women are okay with it, some aren't. But my worry is you do it at 18, 19, now you're 25, you regret it. Right? I'd rather you have some time
Of course.
to think things through and decide, you know what?
Yes.
Yes, I want to go here. No, I don't want to go here. But there's another issue that is in my heart, and that is it's your body, not mine. Right? It's your body, not mine. I don't get to choose. Right? And if you wanted to, right, you could become, and I'm talking women specifically because they have more data on women, but this is for men too.
Mm-hmm.
If a woman wants to become a sugar baby, and which is a big thing for kids in college right now, a lot of kids who are trying to make extra money for college or pay off their debt, the young girls who are 20, 21, 22, they basically get a sugar daddy. The sugar daddy pays them a monthly stipend, and they're available for when the man wants them to be available. That's legal because it's not for sex. It is just you're available for me. Is it sex? Of course it is. Of course it is. But it's technicality. So now you're a savvy 20-something good-looking woman who can get a wealthy guy to have that basically a prostitution relationship. It's fine. But no, you're a poor girl who lives in the Bronx or something like that. You get locked up and go to jail and need a pimp. It's not fair. When you criminalize sex work, you punish poor women. That's what happens. You punish poor women. And wealthier, savvier women.
I don't know if I mean, you say criminalize versus coming up with a regulatory scheme to protect people.
I'd be okay
So
with that.
you would be regulating it, which would be something that wouldn't be very libertarian.
No. I don't mind at all. Look, there are some people who are more anarchist. I'm not an anarchist in that
Right.
regard, right? I understand that the country's not ready for a fully voluntary society. I get that 100%. Would I take a regulation of sex work? I would. I prefer decriminalization. I would. But I would take regulation. If that's the step I have to go to protect poor women, I'll take it. I'm in. I'll take it. I would take a Nevada model, which is not the best model because the Nevada model really helps out wealthy men who own brothels.
What is
right?
what is the Nevada model?
It's much more about the men having brothels, and they're almost all men. There's some women who own, but very much it's outside of cities. You go there, the women are tested, they're regulated, right? They're regulated how they do things, right? So the problem is so much of that money goes to the brothel owner, right? Look, if I take that model, I'll take it. But here's what I know what would happen, because we've seen it happen before. When you have an environment that opens up the market and men dominate it, when women are the workers, they will try, this is what they do all the time, women will try to move up the chain to become managers and owners. And then when they can't, because men will hold them back, they go off on their own and become entrepreneurs. You see it happening constantly, right? That's what happens. So I would take a regulated model, because eventually I think you'd find women who would take charge of their own future and their own destiny.
Well, I do see a silver lining to this.
Please.
business, we would have had Elliot Spitzer longer, which means we never would have had Andrew Cuomo.
That's also true, yes. And there is one good thing about Spitzer. I don't know if you know this, but Spitzer actually was looking at totally revamping family court. He was the last governor to consider. He was in the process of thinking he had a plan to revamp family court, which I wish we would revamp family court. So I'll give Spitzer the credit where credit is due. And in that case, I'm not a huge Spitzer fan, but that one, he actually cared about revamping family court. So I wish he would have got that one done. That would have been nice. So anyway, so yes, that's the libertarian view on sex work, but it's all good.
No,
Yes.
it's enlightening for me because I don't know a lot about it.
Can I ask a
I'm more worried about human trafficking than anything.
Yeah, of course, absolutely. Well, human trafficking, remember, even in the libertarian viewpoint, is still illegal, right? It's still grabbing someone against their will, so that's still using force.
But a
That
lot of
would
those
remain
people
illegal.
don't know it's against their will because they're manipulated so young.
Absolutely.
And so when they're or very vulnerable, whether they're young or not.
And the advantage is if you had that, you would have law enforcement focusing on that and not busting some John who's just trying to have a good time some night with some young lady. Please go ahead.
A woman that was running.
Put your mouth to the mic, please.
I met
There we go.
I met a woman down in D.C. that's running for Congress from Arizona, and she told me, Rita, that the cartels are bringing 11-year-olds across the border, and they have these what are called rape trees, and that's how they initiate them as control and power. They rape them under these rape trees, and then they know.
Don't know.
So
One would assume that you wouldn't want to rape the girl. You would assume that you would want her to be, pristine, I would assume. Isn't that the whole goal of
I'm just
doing
saying
that kind of thing? I don't
with
know.
this-
It's not my world. I don't really
Well,
know.
if you're going to be in sex trafficking, you're only going to be pristine once.
That's true. Good point. Yes, it's true. Yes.
But I mean, it should.
Yes.
It needs to be told, that story. You
No,
know?
I agree. Look, to be forward, libertarians are without question about consenting adults.
I'm just saying.
Yes, no question. Yeah, good. All right. Hold on. Let's see. Let's see if I get another one. I don't know what this is, so I'll ask and see if you know what
All
this
right.
is. Can you address the ombudsman pile? Can it be discontinued? It seems they stuff all kinds of miscellaneous stuff in the bill. I don't know what that is. Do you?
I think they're trying to talk about omnibus. Is it omnibus?
Oh, maybe it's
a-
spelled incorrectly. Well, okay, maybe, yes.
Right. Yeah. So maybe the whole leveraged way that government does omnibus bills, meaning that there's something in a bill that you like, but you got to vote for this
Sure.
before you get it. And-
I'm sure that's what he means. Yes.
So
okay. Yep.
yeah, I had a bill actually in the assembly that would be a single issue bill. You couldn't do omnibus bills. You'd have to vote on each issue separately.
Oh,
up
I
or
love
down vote,
that. Oh my God,
which
yes,
would
I love
prevent
that.
leverage kind of voting, which is why you get caught in it. And they do the same thing in the House of Representatives. They do the same thing in Congress as they do in New York. Although it's more insidious in New York because you have one party rule.
Right. Yes.
And it's very, New Yorkers are now at the mercy of these people who all seem to be from New York City. No offense to New York City here.
No,
but there's
no
one.
one
there's
city should run the
basically
state. I agree.
One viewpoint, and everybody else upstate is a little bit. We're victims of, in a way, because although we benefit from New York City, there's a lot of people that advocate cutting
Sure.
New York City and upstate New York out. But I think you got to stand and fight, and you got to bring New York City closer to upstate, and upstate. We got to find a middle ground somewhere. That the omnibus spending is what causes a lot of the problem. You get, and this is what the governor is probably going to do. Maybe with that bail reform, they're going to throw that in there to do some bail reform, give more discretion to, say, judges on that.
Right.
And then they're going to make you vote for something that you don't want to vote for that he wants on the other side.
So
It's the same thing they just did with the coronavirus
they just gave
funding.
They just gave him $40 million.
They gave money. Well, I'm talking about with the governor. They got the funding, but then they gave the governor all these extraordinary powers,
Yes.
which I thought was terrible.
Insane. He basically
So-
now martial law is okay.
Yeah, he can do whatever he wants
Whatever he
and
wants.
call it an emergency.
Exactly. Oh my God.
So, I mean, this is the kind of stuff that's very scary. Where New York State, is at least on the federal side, it's much more in check. But by the way, ClaudiaForCongress.com is
There
my
we go.
website. If you keep reminding me to say it. So
this is another question that's a little bit off, but I don't know if you can do anything as a congressperson for this. Can you help volunteer firefighters, EMTs with PTSD? By the way, if you want to call in, just 573 427-5463. So, yes, there's a question from online.
Well, PTSD obviously is the PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. I assume they're coming from their service as a volunteer fireman or their service in the military in the past or volunteer fireman.
Or EMT.
Right now, I mean, the designation of having PTSD being a recognized and diagnosable condition that would give you medical care would put you in that umbrella to be cared for, to have care. It's not always the case depending on the kind of health care that you have.
Mm-hmm.
So I do think a lot of people, especially a fireman that has to witness horrific, maybe a structure fire or deal with a traumatic, if they're a first responder and they're also doing that and having to go to a scene where they have to deal with a terrible car accident or deal with this stuff all day long. It's really common, more common in the military, but it does happen to a lot of people that are serving as first responders, domestic situations that are terrible here, just as horrible as they can be over in the Middle East or wherever you might be serving. So it depends on your health care. So volunteer firemen typically do not get anything. And unfortunately, we have a lot of volunteers in my end of the state where they tend to be paid in the big cities.
Absolutely.
And the people who volunteers, God bless them, they do a job they get a pin or a sweatshirt. They don't get paid. They don't get a pension. They don't get what others get, and they provide. I don't know. It's some.
I'm not sure.
It's some astronomical number of the amount of service they provide to the taxpayers for nothing, basically, for very small. And it's incredible. But
I'm not sure that's a federal issue, though, is it? It's really more of a state issue, isn't it?
It's a state issue. It's a healthcare issue, but especially with a volunteer fireman. But we've done a lot to try to give them, even in the state side, to give more and more benefits to them on the state side, incentives, healthcare, education credits, a lot of things we've done to try to help firemen on that side. There have been some bills that haven't been so helpful to them in other cases, but
okay, we have a comment. You can't cut taxes without cutting spending. Just a comment. Thought you might enjoy that. That's all. That's good. So we have another question. Libertarians are coming up now. All right. So
libertarians
they're coming up now. Yes. This is a long question. So let me see if I can cut it down to be clearer. The Republican Party has made overt and covert efforts to get libertarians knocked off of the ballot. Do you think this is acceptable?
First of all, I think it's interesting that my experience is in New York. Mm-hmm. So to call the Republican Party some monolithic group of people who are able to do a whole lot has proven to be not true when you see that the entire state government is controlled by the Democrats and the Republican Party has substantially less enrolled voters than they used to, and many less than the independents and the Democrats. And so
about 2.5
every
to 1,
party
right?
is trying to seek a way to get everyone who's in a competitive race, because of our ballot access issues, is trying to figure out a way to get their opponent off the ballot. It's a lot easier when your ballot has your opponent has less ballot lines when you're in a fusion voting state like we have.
Yeah, for those of you who don't know, New York State is very special. Only about 7 states even have fusion voting. New York is one of the most aggressive when that comes. What that means is, those of you not in New York, we can actually be on multiple lines, right? So you can actually have someone who's on a Republican line and Democrat line, or Republican and Libertarian, or Republican and conservative. You can be in multiple lines, and sometimes you find people on 3, 4, 5, 6 lines on one ballot. So everyone's trying to get those lines.
Yeah. So I mean, one of the things, and that's a big controversy happening now. And Larry went out and. I don't know how many thousands of miles you went trying to get your Libertarian line, but for the first time ever, you got the Libertarian line, a ballot access through the governor's race. So people that are out there that don't know, the only way that you can get a ballot line is to get, the old threshold was to get 50,000 votes on the governor's race in a gubernatorial year. They've changed the rules now. Now it's in a presidential year. And I think the standard is much higher.
Yes, every 2 years, it's either 130,000 votes or 2%, whichever is higher. Now, this year, probably about 8 million New Yorkers will vote, so we're going to need about 160,000 votes, give or take.
It's a lot of votes.
It's a lot of votes.
Right.
It's a lot of votes.
That means,
but Gary Johnson in 2016 did get 175,000. So it is doable for us if we have the right candidate, right? We can do it.
What was the line he was on?
He was on Libertarian and Independence.
Okay.
He was on 2 lines.
What did he get? What did he get the 165,000 on?
He got 175,000 on both combined. I think it was about 100,000 if I remember right. A little over 100 was on independents.
All right.
And a little under 70 I think was on libertarian.
Right. That's a tough. Well, the Conservative Party usually gets over 200,000. But I think it's going to be interesting to see if that commission allows this to go forward.
Right.
I assume it has already made the decision, but no one's stopped them yet. So,
well, there are lawsuits now, which in my view, and obviously I'm totally biased, but in my view, I actually don't mind them raising the numbers or changing them. I don't. I mean, it's totally fine. They can do what they feel is appropriate. My problem is they told me that if I did what I did, I'd get it for 4 years. My problem is stopping this in under 4 years.
Right.
That to me is reneging on their promise.
Right.
That to me is wrong, and in my view, that's illegal. They should not be able to stop it in the middle. They told me that if I do it, I get 4 years. You want to change the threshold? Change it to 2022.
have you joined the lawsuit on this with the Conservative Party? I think
haven't.
Working Families is part of it.
Yep.
So they're trying to change it so that we can protect some of the minor party lines. To be honest with you, I think the Conservative Party over the years has grown because they have been willing to cross-endorse certain candidates to grow their party so they have more and more people that come in on the lines.
Sure.
So that helps them a lot. So I think that sometimes people don't recognize that you have to sometimes align yourself to get them. I think the Working Families Party tends to align themselves with the Democrats,
Yep.
although they have their famous rifts here and there too.
Right.
So it'll be interesting to see what happens this year and what parties survive next year.
Right. Right.
So-
We weren't bad last year. We
But you haven't had
cross-endorsed.
you haven't been able to count in a presidential year.
Not yet.
Right.
This will be the
So-
first one. Last year we had 103 victories, libertarians.
Mm-hmm.
7 were only libertarian, and 96 were somehow cross-endorsed. And I think my popular, if I remember, my most famous, I think it was Cattaraugus County. I'm sure someone will call in and correct me if I'm wrong. Was Cattaraugus County, where we had 11 total candidates. I think, if I remember right, it was, was it 5? No, hold on. It was like 3 were libertarian, 4 were libertarian Democrat, 4 were libertarian Republican. It was like perfect mix of all 3. It was just very good. So we have done that before. So let's go to the healthcare issue if we could. Big deal for everybody talking, particularly because of the Democratic primary, right? Mm-hmm. Medicare for all, or not Medicare for all, or Medicare with a for those who want it, right? Back and forth. Do you have a view either way? I mean, if you win this, you're going to be in the Congress. You're going to have to look at that, and there are going to be bills coming up here saying, hey, we want X, Y, Z. And if Trump loses, if Biden or Bernie wins, there's going to be some kind of Medicare thing going up there. If Trump wins, it'll be some kind of way of changing or adjusting Obamacare. So either way, regardless who wins, you're going to be dealing with Medicare and health care either way. Do you have a view either way?
I am totally opposed to Medicare for all and a government takeover of healthcare. I love the consumer-driven model. I think that you can do it and still provide a public health care facet of it where we can protect people who are truly needy, as we should. I think that we can do that, and we can do that by people who I can choose what health care I have. I don't have to buy a one-size-fits-all healthcare and buy all the things that you would need, and you don't have to buy all the things that I would need as a woman my age. And so I think it's harmful that we are always dependent on our employer for our health care, that they've created a mandate. And as an employer of a small business that has over 50 employees, we have to provide health care under the Obamacare mandate. And our health care, at the time when we started providing health care for our employees, it was a great incentive and benefit for us to attract good employees.
Sure.
Now it's just a burden that is so costly that it's actually, we can't provide as good a healthcare as we used to have. Our healthcare we used to have, a lot, it was much less expensive. And I'm on the healthcare. And even when I was in Congress, I paid for my own healthcare through our family business. I paid for it myself. I didn't take the government option. And I paid for it. And it was more expensive than before, but we also had, we had the cafeteria plan. We had, you could join a health club. You could get counseling. We had good optical and dental. And
so if I'm hearing what you're saying,
we're in a rural area, so we needed to attract good employees.
Sure.
So we were incentivized to provide health care to our employees.
So hold on. Are you telling me that, if I'm clear, do you want to fix Obamacare, get rid of Obamacare, or not either, and Medicare, Do you want to reform Medicare, Medicaid, or kind of keep it the way it is and allow for more private market? I'm kind of curious on where would you like to go here?
Well, it's not that simple of an issue. So number one, I think we have to repeal Obamacare.
Mm-hmm.
And you have to have a model, and it's not going to be, you can't just, get rid of it immediately
Sure.
and not have something to ease us into where we need to go. Going the Medicare for all way is just the total destruction of our society.
Sure.
I mean, it's the end of small business. It's the end of any kind of negotiating. You're going to be just consumed with debt, and government's going to control everything, and the government's going to control your healthcare decisions. They're going to decide who gets to get their medicine and who doesn't based on what. You're going to be reading a code and a chart, which is antithetical to what this country stands for and what our Constitution is about.
If the Bernie model actually comes to pass, it's actually more draconian than the Scandinavian countries that he says we should be, following. Even the Scandinavian countries still have private insurance.
Absolutely.
Right? I mean, they have a bigger safety net, but they absolutely still have private insurance.
And they're also more, the populace of those countries are so much smaller and so much less diverse than our country is in so many ways.
All of those
diverse on every
countries
sector.
together, Texas has more people. Texas has more people than all of the 4 Scandinavian countries. New York City has more people than Finland. New York City has more people than Denmark. New York City has more people than Norway. Only Sweden has more people than New York City. So completely true. And Finland, with the exception of Japan, is the most ethnically homogenous country on the planet.
Right. So they're not good examples. And also they're moving away from a lot of that. But my concern is this. So we have a capitalist system, a market-driven model. You've got to have people have a chance to be able to buy their health care, because when you have a choice and when people are competing and whether it's the pharmaceutical companies, healthcare companies, they are all, when they do not have to compete, and we have a mandate. Insurance companies love a mandate when you have to buy insurance.
Yes.
I mean, people would say, I remember people coming up to me when Obamacare was going to pass, and they said, we're going to finally stick it to those insurance companies. I'm like, they love this.
I can't wait. Yes.
They love this because now you have to buy it.
You just gave them 30 million more customers.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Absolutely.
And so many people are unable to afford it, like people in my area. And so there is a way that, so I feel like the politicians on both, mostly Democrats, but some Republicans have gotten away with eroding the kind of money that we are putting aside for Social Security, which is a program that we all pay into it when you work. And it has been eroded and defrauded on a number of levels, whether it's some of the tax, it's been what they call swept is what they call it in the state government. But that means we're taking my money that I put into Social Security and putting it into other programs.
It's a Ponzi scheme.
Right. If you had just kept it, with a lockbox, Social Security wouldn't be in the situation it is. And I'll tell you right now, I'm 59. I've been working since I was 16. And if I don't have Social Security, I know how these people feel. There's nothing I want more than to make sure that I get Social Security. I went through it with my parents, and both of them worked. And of course, you get a lesser amount when my dad died. My mom got my dad's Social Security, but it was less, even though she worked too.
Right.
So there's a lot of ways to attack this, and I've tried to come up with my own solutions on how to deal with it. But I still think that we do have to have a public health care system for people who are needy. I know that doesn't sound very libertarian, but there are ways of doing that.
Totally fine. I was, if you notice, I was never about abolishing anything.
Yeah.
When I ran for governor, I was with the same thing. I wanted to create other options that would allow people to compete against the monopoly that is government. And then either the public, this idea gets better, so now government has to get better, or government goes away. Both are the right answer. No. So if government gets better, then the poor get better service, or government goes away because the private market provides so much that everyone can have a piece of it. Either one.
This is an idealistic example.
Sure.
But it was given to me by a friend of mine who owns a number of veterinary clinics in the metropolitan area. And he said, we just want to keep the government and insurance companies and pharmaceutical companies out of our veterinary clinics because, he said, think about when you have, when you take your pet to the vet, you don't have to go through the government. You don't have to go through an insurance company. You don't have to go through a pharmaceutical company, although we're kind of moving in that direction.
It is starting to happen with right.
He said, think how much cheaper it is when you actually have a consumer-driven model like that, where you're not having government interfering, because that's
Absolutely.
where the latent cost comes in. This guy said, I bought an MRI machine. It's as good as, it's state of the art.
Yep.
It's just like anything you'd get in a hospital. He goes, but you can come down and I can give you an MRI for a fraction of the price that you would
Absolutely.
spend, because there's no government, there's no insurance company. And so that type of model, I
Well,
think,
we have
would
a
really
model
help.
already that's actually on humans, right?
Right.
And I use it all the time. Look at any model that is not essential, right? LASIK eye surgery, cosmetic dentistry, body enhancements, anything that's not essential. In every single case, accessibility has gone up, pricing has gone down, service has gone up. Right? We're old enough to remember when LASIK eye surgery used to be by the eye because it was so expensive. If you remember back in the day.
Oh, that's right. Yeah,
Yes,
kind of.
because
That
it
was
was
the
so
very
expensive.
beginning. Yeah,
That's
yeah.
exactly right. Right off the bat, it was, well, you can only afford one eye at a time. It was so expensive. Now everybody gets it, right? Cosmetic dentistry used to only be for Hollywood stars. Everybody gets it now, right? And that's because there isn't a certificate of need. There isn't a government intervention. There isn't all these insurance pieces. And all of a sudden, all of that has come down. More people get it. So we have the same example, but on humans already here.
Yeah, it is. I'll tell you the other thing. I was in South Korea a couple times last year and the year before, and everyone's like, "Oh, well, they have single payer," but they don't really,
They don't,
because if you get in a car accident, that's not covered.
Yeah.
They will cover your basic health care.
Correct,
It's almost
yes.
and it's a smaller population. And so to me, though, I just don't want the government to decide what health care I need. Honestly, I need health care for a 59-year-old woman. I don't need health care for a guy who is at a certain age, or
Right.
someone who has, some kind of catastrophic illness. And I think that's why creating a way that we can protect those people with pre-existing conditions, people who need the public health care system, and who can't afford. Some people have pre-existing conditions and they can afford it.
Sure.
But there are ways to make it work so that the system can cover everyone without having a government top-down system that Bernie Sanders proposes. Sure. So another issue, like I had this other concern about dealing with deductions. When people talk about how you get benefits, for Social Security and having to deal with some of the other issues. I came up with this thing called the significant other benefit. So you could have that deduction on your taxes. Because think about your taxes right now. I'm single. I don't get to deduct anybody. I don't get
Right.
the marital deduction. I know a lot of people felt that they didn't get the benefit before they had gay marriage, and you couldn't take any kind of deduction there. Well, I have this idea that I got from a friend of mine, and he was a tax guy, who called it the significant other benefit, that you could get everyone is the same, so we're not treated indifferently in a different way on the tax code.
Sure. I love it.
So SOB is what it is.
I like it. SOB. I'm not sure. That's a fine. Yes.
Yeah.
Let me
but
grab a
there
call
are
if I can.
I'm just trying to, I don't know if it works, but I think it's a way of trying to make the system non-political, not getting into judging people on where they come from. But it's kind of a libertarian idea, but it also it equalizes the tax code, because honestly, there's an incentive. If you're married or you can have a way to have deductions, you're actually in a better position than the rest of us who are single.
Sure. Yep.
So
that's true. Okay.
That's another aspect. I'm just trying to always think about other ways. Now, somebody might call it on your show and say, that's a terrible idea for these reasons, and I would be happy to take the feedback on it.
Sure. Let me grab a call if I could.
All right.
We're staying in New York. I don't know why, but maybe because you're here. So New York and mostly upstate. We have Aaron calling from Syracuse. Wants to talk about defense spending. Aaron, are you there?
Sure am, Larry. How you doing?
I'm doing well. What's going on, my friend?
Well, I'm here in Syracuse. We used to be a toss-up district, changed Democrat, Republican, and John Katko's had this on lockdown for a few years now.
Okay.
What do you say to moderate Republicans that just keep increasing the defense spending? How much is too much to have the greatest and best military the world has ever seen?
It's a good point, right? I think most of the time you find most Republicans, since probably maybe Reagan, I'm going to go maybe even Nixon, have been really hawkish in the military and have really expanded the military. Democrats too, but I think more Republicans are much more happy to, if they're going to throw money at a project, it's probably a defense spending project, right? That's probably where they want to go, on maybe foreign wars or more tanks, more battleships, more insert thing here. How do you decide what's the right amount of cut, or how do you stand on that?
I think there's a big difference in the military between supporting our troops innovation, technology, the new kind of warfare that we're engaging in versus the military-industrial complex. Mm-hmm. And there's a difference. And I never really understood what that really was until I got into Congress and saw a little of it. I wasn't on the Armed Services Committee, but you have to vote on all these military spending bills. I also have a son who's a captain in the Marine Corps who has described to me, the terrible state of decay of a lot of our forces, and unfortunately, we've been overseas in a lot of places for a long time, and I know that there's a lot of concern about how long we've been in Afghanistan.
Sure.
Which the president, in good faith, tried to put an agreement together, and within 24 hours, they, up in smoke. So terrible situation. So it's a very it's not the simplest question to answer, but in my region, we have what's known as the Air Force Research Lab, which is a world-renowned technological cybersecurity, a number of issues which are preparing us for the future, whether it's cyber technology, dealing with drones, dealing with a number of ways that we can reduce the cost of our military, but make it, more efficient, less casualties, whether it's on our side or even dealing with civilian casualties in the rest of the world. So I think trying to repurpose our military to a more modern force, but you also still have to maintain, as you know, as a Marine, you can't just do everything from the air.
Sure.
And so I think there's I don't know what the right amount is. And I'll tell you, I've done a number of trips. You go over to overseas and you always got the colonel or the general, and they want to take you through and show you the troops. And then they always take you into the room with all the dilapidated. And we said, we need new equipment.
Right, sure.
So, people have said to me, sometimes those are legitimate and sometimes they just want more stuff to play with.
Sure.
So, I would like to think that our military, if you serve there, are a little bit more responsible than that. And that they know that we need certain things to keep our own soldiers and our Marines and airmen out of harm's way. So,
but let's go.
It's
to
hard
a
to know.
bigger
I don't
piece
really
then.
know how. I don't really know what the right amount is.
No, I got you.
That's a hard question.
How about the idea of the foreign wars? Right. Right now, I think we're engaged in some way, shape, or form in about 7 different countries. Some with troops in them fighting, some with
Many
drone
more.
strikes.
We're still in countries from World War II.
No, I mean aggressive. Aggressive. I'm sorry,
okay.
not yes.
You mean defensive?
Yes, the
Because
presence.
we're technically not aggressive anymore.
Okay, but yes.
I've said technically not aggressive.
So about 7.
We assist. We don't engage like in the Middle East.
I think if you look at how this began after 9/11, Bush was aggressive, but not as aggressive as Obama. Obama was more aggressive than Bush. And Trump has followed the Obama model when it comes to aggression. They've all been aggressive in about 7 to 9 countries, depending upon what time of day it is and what year it is. They've been either bombing in some way, shape, or form, actively supporting in some way, shape, or form, drone striking in some way in about 8 or 9 countries, give or take, since Obama through Trump. Is this?
But
do you have a view on this?
Wait, isn't there a statistic that said the least aggressive in terms of going to war president we've had is Trump, though?
But no,
I read that as in terms of like the number of engagements, whether you look at Obama with Libya and a number of areas where he went.
No. Obama was more aggressive than both, but Trump hasn't really pulled much back. I mean, I guess maybe not Libya anymore, but I think in
terms of pulling back.
Last I knew, we were still doing.
In terms of the word is like warlike or like aggressively going in. I think that's what the word.
Maybe
one of the listeners
possible.
Could call us and give us. I just read that somewhere that it was. I was surprised by it, but it's actually less.
Yeah, I don't think Trump has been any more aggressive at all, and I mean, at all. But he hasn't really pulled back much either. I remember, we're still bombing in Yemen. We're still bombing in either it's Ethiopia or is it Abyssinia? I forgot. One of those countries.
When
Somalia,
you say
maybe.
bombing, we're supporting Saudi Arabia or
actually
other countries.
droning. Literally having drones fire missiles and such. When I say bombing, I include missiling. When I say bombing to include missile drops. I think in Mali still, if not mistaken. I think we've stopped in Libya, still in Syria, if not mistaken. Obviously Iraq and obviously Afghanistan. So there are many countries where we're still actively engaging in some way, shape, or form. Do you believe we should stop or not stop, or are some okay? As Tulsi Gabbard often says, the regime change wars she's against, or Bernie says all wars, stop them. Or where do you stand in that regard? Do you have a view on where we should be? Do you have a view either way?
Well, I'm not an expert in the military.
Sure.
I just can only comment on what I've seen and what I've learned and what I've been able to have access to. We live in a very unsafe world.
Sure.
And there's a lot of issues going around the world that we do need to have some kind of sane presence in. I do wish we could bring more of our troops home, and I understand why Trump is determined to try to do that. But you can see, the Afghanistan is a conundrum. It is. I've been to Afghanistan a couple times. I've talked to our troops on the ground about it without having their officers there and having to have frank discussions with them. And it is a very frustrating place when we've taken women's literacy from 0 to 15% in the last 20 years. I mean, there's a lot of things that I don't know if we're going to change a very old culture in any short order of time or what. But the idea behind it, which was always explained, is that Afghanistan is sort of a central location for all kinds of drug trafficking and other things that are happening around the world, terrorist cells and organizations, because they can easily hide in there. It's very interesting. The geography out of it is very tough. So, and it's been like that for a long time.
Absolutely.
I mean, everybody loses their war in Afghanistan.
It's called the graveyard of empires.
Yeah, I mean, it's
Yes.
so that is
From Alexander.
Yeah, it's a complex place.
Yes.
You go throughout all the empires, the Ottomans, the Venetians, everybody's gone through all over Europe and the Middle East and where have we ended up. So I don't know what the answer is to how to stop it. I know Aaron's like, where do you stop the spending? What do you know is the most important? It seems
it's a
to me
worry
there
that we
is
have,
a lot
right?
of technology that we could use, but then my son tells me that you can't just rely on cybersecurity or drones. You still have to have a force that's capable of dealing, on the ground to some extent. And the question is where does it cut off? And some of these countries are so complex.
Absolutely.
Politically.
In Syria, we're on all sides.
Well,
Literally. In Syria, we're on all sides.
So is everybody.
Exactly. Everybody is fighting everybody who's defending everybody who's an ally to everybody. Syria is horrible.
Yeah,
No matter who you fight, you're hurting a good guy and helping a bad guy, no matter who you fight.
Right. I mean, the Middle East is such a complex place, and
Sure.
it's not going to get any simpler right now. So I
What
wish
about
I
the
wish I had
idea-
a better answer for Aaron, because I don't.
What about the
I
idea
don't know
of just,
when
of just
is
walking
enough.
away? What about the idea of just walking away? What about that idea of saying, Middle East, we've lost, we declare victory and pack up and leave? What about that idea? There are people who are saying it's such a quagmire, we're just throwing good money after bad. At one point, when did we just declare victory and walk away? When did we do Vietnam? We did Vietnam at one point, right? Put about 10 years, 60,000 dead Americans and hundreds of thousands of broken Americans. And we finally just said, we're out. We packed up and we left. At one point, we just left and we lost that war. Is it time, in your view, and I'm just asking if you have an opinion, that there any country in the Middle East we should just go, you know what? This one's done. Is it Iraq? Is it Syria? Is it none of them? Is it Afghanistan? It's Vietnam. Let's just walk away.
I actually don't think any of those countries want us to get up and walk away, except maybe Iran.
Okay.
So I think a lot of these countries are looking at us for our aid and our support, which from a libertarian perspective, you would say, hey, why do we have to feed the world's poor and care for people overseas? We've brought thousands of them here as refugees over the past 20 or 30 years.
Sure.
And a lot of them are grateful that they could have another chance at life, especially here. So I just don't think there's a simple answer that you can just pull out and abandon, for example, Israel, or abandon some of the progress we're making in some of these countries.
Sure.
So, but I do think the policy that we're trying to implement, which you could argue maybe isn't working, especially in the Middle East, from what has been told to me, is that we are trying to assist countries in developing themselves as opposed to coming in and fighting their war. Like, for example, in Iraq, or, when I was there, I had an opportunity to be in Iraq and also go to Erbil, which is up in the northern end in Kurdistan area. And we are in the background at the time we were. So at what point, I agree, it just seems like endless, because they're going to continue to want our help and our training and our sophistication and everything that we do. And you have to ask, well, how does that impact the United States? Is the United States safer? Are we safer in doing this? And I think that's a tough question. Okay. I'm not sure any general can answer that question.
Sure. Okay. So,
I know.
Aaron, are you still there?
We lost him.
Sure
Oh,
am.
there he
Oh,
is.
excellent.
There he
Good.
is.
Yes.
Sorry about that.
That was long-winded.
We're kind of long. Sorry.
But did that at least answer your question?
It kind of did. I'd like to do a short little follow-up.
Go ahead, please.
If President Trump actually does withdraw the troops from Afghanistan and we bring a bunch of troops home, do you actually think that's going to reduce military spending, or are they just going to find something else to spend the money on?
Ooh, it's a good question.
That's a
So
good question.
if we actually began to bring some troops home, let's say the next deal he puts together works, right? For the sake of argument, the next deal works. We pull our troops out. The world's not ending in Afghanistan. We bring our troops home. Is the Congress disciplined enough to actually, I know you're laughing, so I think we know our answer already, Aaron. She's laughing. So is the Congress disciplined enough to actually go, you know what? Let's save some of this money and do something else with it. Or is the Congress going to say, you know what? Yemen's empty. Let's throw some people in there.
Well, it's interesting. He asked if President Trump would do that. And so all spending and appropriations originate in the House of Representatives. So it's up to the House to do that. And the president can go in and reject it, or the Senate could reject it, by not accepting what the appropriations are. And that'd be one way of doing it. One of the big things that we talk about is the ability of us to cut off the funding. And I know this is something a lot of people don't realize, but we haven't had a declaration of war since World War II.
Absolutely.
So we've been
1942 was the last time we declared war.
We've been continuing and continuing. There's been, the War Powers Act was passed under Nixon, and it's under question. We just had another vote on it back in the fall, in the Christmas time or November area. I can't remember when that was Christmas time. And so the question is, will the president say, let's pull? He's trying to pull troops out of Afghanistan. I'll tell you right now, a lot of people don't want him to do that, and they're melting down. And a lot of Republicans were very upset when he wanted to do that, when he wanted to pull the troops out of Syria. Remember that whole hysteria with a lot of the General Mattis
but let's
quit?
say if he does, let's assume
Right.
the next one he does, it works. It's the right deal, right? He puts the right deal together, and people come out of Afghanistan. What Aaron's trying to say is, do you think the Congress will be disciplined enough to go, good, no more. That's gone. Let's not do any more.
Right, which is what I'm saying. I think it's going to be up to the president to say, I'm not going to support that. We cut all that $5-10 billion appropriation there. I'm not going to let you spend it somewhere else.
Got it.
I dare say, if the Democrats are in power, it is definitely going to go to domestic spending.
Sure, yes.
So-
sure, yes.
We will go back to the type of spending where we give out member item, what they call, pork.
Sure.
Which is not being done theoretically right now. We could get into the state government and talk about pork, which
Oh
is
my God, it's horrible.
out of control.
Absolutely.
Which is a big difference between the state government and the federal government
Sure.
in terms of that.
So did that answer your question, Aaron?
I think it's got to be the president.
Yes, that actually did, absolutely.
Excellent, good.
And the fact that, especially if the Democrats take over, it'll just shift right over to domestic spending.
Excellent. Thank you, brother. I
Thank
appreciate
you. I
it.
appreciate it.
Thank you.
So that brings two different issues up that I want to bring up next. And one of them, you mentioned something that I thought was interesting. You mentioned that so many of the people in the wars that we fought, we've allowed some of their refugees to come to our country, right? Immigration, big issue, right? Should we build a wall, not build a wall? Should we be having bans for people from different countries, open borders, closed borders? Do you have a view on any of those things? Where do you stand on all those ideas?
Well, it's interesting because I don't think we have a very organized plan in terms of immigration, and people seem to think that's a terrible thing. Why would you have a plan? But we have an economy, and we have a society that relies on our Constitution, which guarantees us some things: freedom, individual rights, and the ability to protect ourselves, and among many other things. And so when you have a government that is just bringing in people who do not necessarily assimilate and adopt our views, this is an experiment, if you will, the American society. You've got to have people that want to come in and live the same way, the e pluribus unum, from many one. It's about all of us can live under one roof and we preserve freedom in our Constitution. That's what I think it really is. You can't have people just coming in solely to come in to create their own society here. We celebrate diversity and people that come in and add to that whole melting pot of America, which is about freedom. And every person of every walk of life can enjoy and crave freedom, which is what we're about. What I'm concerned about is that we create these groups and enclaves that don't support our way of life and our Constitution. And so I think that immigration is important to continue to provide people that can come in and work, whether it's our industries in our area. One of the problems that we have in upstate New York, because of the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act and because of the rolling back regulations, is we have all these new jobs that need to be filled. They've been created. Now we need people to fill them.
I heard when I crossed the state, I heard more than once people say things like, Larry, I will hire anybody with a work ethic. Anybody. Don't care what they're...
Or
I'll train
anyone
them.
that we can teach them how to do something.
Yes, and that one guy actually told me this. I love this story. He said, here's my hiring plan. I tell them that the interview's at 8 o'clock. I open the door at 8 o'clock. If they're there, they're hired. That's literally what he said, because he was having trouble getting people to even show up. And when I told that story about a week or two later on the campaign, one person said, Larry, he's so right. He's like, I had 12, remember the story, he said, I had 12 interviews scheduled this week. 6 were no-shows, 4 were late. So only 2 showed up on time. 4 showed up late. 6 didn't even show up. So I think it is an issue. We do have a problem with trying to find people. And I think you find an interesting push-pull here. You find a bunch of people who are saying, control our borders, no immigrants, control our borders, no immigrants. We don't want immigrants. We don't want that. But then out of the next part, they're like, boy, I need some people to work in my restaurant or people to work in my hotel or people to work in my cleaning service. And they will happily take people who are on my farm. And they will happily take people who are immigrants who are totally undocumented. They just want the workers. And I think we find a real problem here, a desire to have the cheap labor, but a fear of, to your point, a fear of these people are coming and they don't really understand us. I think we have both of those, don't we?
To be honest with you, I have a different experience.
Tell me, please.
I could probably count on one hand, so maybe 5 people who don't want immigrants to come to our country. They just want them to come legally. They want them to come legally to live the way they did. My father came here. His family came here. His parents and they came as immigrants from other countries, and they were so grateful to come here to get a job. And that's what they were looking for. But we have a culture that people are not always looking for a job. They want to come and enjoy what the taxpayers have.
Sure.
And I think what the issue is that people want anyone that comes here, and we want to have more immigrants come here, but we want them to understand something. Citizenship has a value. It's meaningful. It means something to all of us. And I find that it's interesting. Some of the newer immigrants value citizenship and the benefits of being an American and freedom more than some of the people who just took it for granted.
Oh my God, far
it's
more.
amazing
100%.
how many
Yes.
people I meet in my region, which is a huge refugee population. How many of them come in as refugees? Some of them come in just as immigrants looking for a job or whatever. How many of them are so much more grateful for that value of citizenship and being an American citizen and the opportunity to be free? And it is really incredible. And I'll tell you, I could tell you 100 stories, but I'll just tell you one interesting story. I had a woman that was doing my nails. She happened to be Vietnamese, and she was going back to Vietnam. And, she's a great person, really just entrepreneurial, trying to do her business and everything. And she was going back to visit a relative in Vietnam. And I said, would you ever move back to Vietnam? She goes, oh, no. And I said, why wouldn't you move back there? And she said, because I'm not free.
Yeah.
Even though they're technically free, she goes, I'm not free. Somebody at the government is watching, looking at me. She goes, we're free here. We really are for now. But
Right, sure.
So I just say, I just never really thought about that until you go somewhere else and you realize what it's like to not be free. And it's funny
you think
when
that-
you leave New York State and you go to another state,
Absolutely.
like Tennessee or even across the border into Pennsylvania, you feel like sometimes the oppression of government has been lifted off of you because of
100%,
the way
yes.
that, the unwelcoming kind of oppression that has been brought on by a lot of the over-regulation that's
Without
going on in
question.
New York.
Yes.
And
So let me be clear about the immigration piece. So if I'm clear, what you're saying is you would like to create, in your perfect world, you would like to create easier legal way of people coming here? Is that what I'm hearing?
I think that people. I'm a humanitarian. I mean, I know there are people. They talk about the DACA people that have been brought here, and a lot of them really do want to be accepted. They want to become citizens, and I'm all for giving them a path as long as we give the people who came here legally the front of the line. And as long as they can prove that the various factors that we voted on, and when we were in Congress, we had a bill, as long as they can prove that they are, going to be hardworking, or they're not going to be dependent on public assistance, that they're they don't have a criminal background, and they want to come here and do what every other hardworking American does, is to go out and work and raise a family or live their life in the way they want to live it. I'm all for that. And I think we could use immigrants to actually fill a lot of the jobs.
Sure.
I do think there's unfair advantages given to certain groups. And I think that I would just like to make it more streamlined and fair so that we're not bringing people in. For example, I know there's a lot of concern over a lot of the visas. We have a lot of people in the STEM field, for example.
Yes.
And companies are incentivized to bring in people from overseas to take those jobs so they can pay less than what we would pay all these young college students that are STEM majors who are being displaced because they're not getting the chance at those jobs first. So I just would like to see legal citizens get their way first. And then consider some of those people. I remember one day sitting with the President of the United States at the Oval Office, him very concerned about the DACA kids and wanting to find a way to help them. He said, they're here. Let's figure out a way to solve this problem. Very practical solution. And so I think that there's a misinformation campaign out there that somehow people are against people that are different or people from other countries. I don't think that's really the case. And I do think maybe with some people, but I think when people have a chance to meet them, to learn about other cultures, and I think in a place like where I live in Utica, New York, where we have such a huge diversity of refugees who, for the most part,
is that right?
They're from everywhere.
Yeah.
Actually, Bosnia is probably our biggest.
There we go, Bosnia.
Yeah,
yes.
and I lived in Yugoslavia, so I love having all the Bosnians. They're wonderful. I can speak a little Serbo-Croatian with them and Bosnian. And I actually, what you don't know, maybe some of your listeners, is I actually created the very first newspaper in Bosnia and in Utica.
There we go.
Because of my past working for the former Yugoslav consulate. And I did that when I was Rita was asking me, what'd you do when you lived in New York City? I said, I worked for the Yugoslav consulate during the Olympics in Sarajevo, long before the war.
There we go.
So,
okay. So you went to another piece. Let me go to the next piece you brought up. You brought the idea of, getting benefits. There's 60 some odd million Americans somehow getting Social Security benefits or Medicare benefits. There's a lot of Americans getting benefits. It's a huge problem. Because now so many people are getting benefits, it's going to run out of money, right?
The Ponzi scheme. Am I supposed to answer this with "Okay, Boomer"?
You could, I guess. Yes, I guess
we're both boomers. I actually don't know how old you are. So
yes, so
I think you're younger than I am, though.
I am. Yeah, I'm 51. Yes, I am. So yes. So the question becomes, how do we handle that, right? There's a point to where I'm sure everyone who cares about people wants to support people, but you don't want to make it to where now it's a welfare state. So how do you deal with the issue that we've basically allowed people to be on the dole for so long? How do you fix that? How do you deal with that? Do you have a view either way on how do you deal with all of the people who are right now in that issue?
It is. I think that we have a lot of population in the United States that appears that maybe don't prefer our way of life, and you certainly are entitled to your own way of life when you come here, as long as you live up to your constitutional principles and you abide by the laws. You can pretty much do anything you want as long as you don't hurt anyone. That would be very libertarian.
Sure.
But I do think there comes a point where there is a burden when you have people that come in, when you have too many of them that come into areas that are not as economically viable.
Sure.
And then they have an overabundance of immigrants coming in.
Well, no, I wasn't just talking immigrants. Right. I mean, even Americans.
Or
right?
American,
you have Americans who are, for example,
citizens,
massively overweight who now have to go on disability. People who have pre-existing conditions who now have to go on disability. Right. People who can't work. People who have injuries. People who are over 65. Insert thing here. I'm talking there are tens of millions of Americans who are receiving a government subsidy now for lots of reasons. The problem is we're running out of money, right? It's a massive entitlement. So do you have a view on how do we handle that issue? It's a massive issue that in the next 10 to 15 years is somehow going to come to a head when we have the aging population, people living longer, more people gaining entitlements, and less people able to pay, all those things.
Well, we've got to figure out a way to have more people get back to work.
Okay.
So, like in my region, we have a very large refugee population. I think they've been, for the most part, they've been very helpful to our community. They've provided a lot of jobs to a lot of different industries that probably would have had to move had we not had some of the refugees to come in to do some of the jobs. Some of them are very high skilled. They're people that were accountants and lawyers who really had language issues here, so they had to work in factories or did other things until they got themselves into their own businesses, especially a lot of the Bosnians. But I think that if you bring people over that are dependent on our society too much, dependent on the benefits, on entitlements, when they haven't, I think you're displacing a lot of people who have worked their whole life, who are now may have their Social Security in jeopardy. So I don't know where the balance is, but there's got to be some kind of balance. But then again, it looks like government getting in there and regulating it. But I think the immigration system is trying to.
There is an idea to raise the age of when you get Social Security. Are you maybe into that idea? Like, well, now it's not 65, now it's 70, or now it's 67, or now it's 68, or any of those type of plans that people have brought up. But you actually hit on another
issue, is that a lot of people apply for their Social Security benefits early because they have a disability or for whatever reason. So, but I think the problem is the burden on the system. There's so many people that are on entitlements in so many areas that maybe we have too many immigrants in some areas. I want to say immigrants, like maybe the refugee population, maybe they should be, maybe we should have a better plan for where some of these people are placed, because some of the other areas that are either in economic downfall or economic decline can't really handle a lot of that population. Where I don't know what the answer to that is, but it seems that there are people around. I feel like you've made a contract, like for me, I've been working since I was 16. And for some, I think that there's solutions that you should raise the age, but I didn't make that contract.
Oh, there we go. We have a very good comment for you.
Yeah.
Despite very big differences in my opinions/principles, I really respect Claudia for coming on and being willing to take hard questions and answer with mutual respect. Look at that. You got a good comment.
Thank you.
Now I have a question. Why do you think the United States has taken on the task of presuming to be a savior of the entire planet? Why is it our business when we have more than enough business being ignored here in our own country? We have people that starve to death daily, who freeze to death daily, who have nowhere to literally live.
You're talking about in the United States?
Yes.
Okay, yeah. Well, we have an altruistic society, and a lot of people want to help the starving children all around the world. They feel like that's their obligation as human beings. And I think that if that's someone's mission, they should go and do that competently.
But I think what his point is, he's saying,
he's saying it first. Why are we doing that?
As a nation, why do we think we have to go? And to your point, right, you were saying we're in the Middle East trying to help these countries become better countries. And I think his point is, why? Right? His point is, why do that? Let's help ourselves be a better country versus trying to help the Iraqis or the Afghanis or insert country here. I think that's his question.
Yeah, I think that, there's a number of reasons why we do that. Obviously, we want to try to, it's part of an overall diplomacy strategy when you're working with other countries. If you can keep their children from starving and help people learn how to take care of themselves. I'm not sure we've been so effective in doing that you will ultimately let them be more dependent. I'm not sure that always works. I mean, we have USAID, for example. We go in with our aid and try to help starving populations. We go into all kinds of countries and try to help them as part of our diplomatic military situation. When you're in the military, if you served overseas, you always have the diplomatic component to everywhere you go. And so I think that's all part of the whole diplomatic scheme of it. And to try to help the countries in to be good hosts when we're there, or be good guests when we're there, trying to assist these nations. So I do think it comes from an altruistic type of mentality that we feel like we've got to save the world. I do tend to agree that there comes a point where I would like to help the people in my community, which is why although I care very much about the rest of the world, I do like to focus on the children and the people and the vulnerable seniors and people in my area
Sure.
who are suffering. And I think a lot of us want to help in that way. So I do,
Okay.
that would be, that's definitely a libertarian case to be made.
Someone's asking, do you support allowing crowdfunding for medical expenses to be tax deductible for donors, encouraging voluntary crowdsourcing? The idea that, I need an operation, can I crowdsource it? If people donate to that, to my medical problem or my medical situation, do you think that should be a tax deduction as a donation?
Well, medical deductions, it is a tax deduction now. So
no,
the
for me
question is-
personally, but
right.
if I donate to you, right, you have a catastrophic issue.
credit or a deduction?
A deduction is the question is
Okay.
deduction, right? Please, if you think credit's the right answer, I'm happy to hear that.
Yeah.
Whatever you think is appropriate. But the question was, I donate, she donates to you because you have a catastrophic issue. Right now, that donation to you is not tax deductible. The question is, do you think that should be to encourage crowdsourcing and to encourage voluntary helping? Do you believe that should be tax deductible?
I actually like that idea. I think it's a great idea. It encourages more. It's almost. I mean, obviously, it's not a 501c3 or
Sure.
a charitable deduction. It's technically a charitable deduction, but I certainly, if you could deem it to be a viable charitable deduction, type of charitable medical deduction, I think that would be something it would be really interesting on the tax code.
Well, in theory, if
because
that
it's
was
kind
true-
of a hybrid of that.
It is, right?
Yeah.
So you probably could, in theory, maybe have the crowdsourcing app that does it validate.
It could solve a lot of
validate
our
somehow.
medical issues. Could
Yeah.
you imagine if you could? I mean, if it could be regulated in some way to make sure it wasn't scammed,
Right.
To have somebody be able to say, I really want to help a person who can't afford their medical costs.
Yeah.
I think it sounds like a very interesting idea.
Well, there
It's
we
like
go.
the SOB,
Yeah. Yes, that's exactly
the
right. Yes.
significant other benefit.
Yes. Yeah. Another one asking libertarians, where?
How do you know they're libertarians?
Because they're literally asking a libertarian line.
Oh, okay.
Yes, if they're asking a libertarian line, they're libertarians.
Well,
That's
how
I
do you know that? Because, like I used to go on that C-SPAN channel. They'd have that open forum.
Yep.
And they'd have the Democrat line and they'd have the Republican line. And I always got all the Democrats would call the Republican line and the Republicans would call the Democrat line to try to confuse you.
Well, no, I don't have any lines, so it's
All
just
right.
whoever's coming in, right?
All right.
But I can tell
Just
this
saying.
libertarian by what they're saying, right?
Oh.
They're asking, how can you help the libertarian line not be squashed by the D's and the R's?
Well, I think the libertarians should support more people that are like them. So I went online and did your test. By the way, I'm also ClaudiaForCongress.com because Larry told me to keep saying it.
Absolutely.
So if you want to go check it out, I'm actually seeking the libertarian line because I decided when you were running and you finally got your line established. I used to see you at a lot of the pro gun events and gun shows, and I like that. I thought it was a great thing about you, and so I went online and did the libertarian test on your page, and I came out 80% libertarian.
Look at that, 80%.
So
I love it.
I think 80% is a pretty good number. So if I'm 80% libertarian, why would somebody not want to have me on their line when they could end up, if they ended up putting someone middle of the road, you'd end up with a Brindisi who's almost 100% left-wing liberal socialist. So wouldn't you rather have someone closer in values to that's why I think sometimes the libertarian might be the only choice, but sometimes, teaming up with, it's not always the party, it's the person.
Sure.
So I think that's it.
I think the worry is if the worry is
that who you're going to be beholden to because you're carrying. But when you
Well,
carry
not
the
even
banner
that.
of having a line, you should be living up to a certain percentage of those principles
Sure.
better than somebody else would.
Yeah,
the better
I
candidate.
think the worry is if anyone, not just you, but anyone gets elected,
Right.
that they won't care about the libertarian line after, right? They'll be like, I'll care about the libertarian line 2 years from now, and if they don't exist, whatever. If they exist, awesome, I'll take advantage of it.
Right.
I think what many libertarians are concerned about is, right now most Democrats want to retain the Working Family Party. Most Republicans want to retain the Conservative Party. Libertarians are worried, does anybody want to retain us?
I would love to have
Right?
the libertarian.
Does that make sense?
I'd love to have the libertarian line and live up to my 80% that I took on your quiz. So you're going to support me for the libertarian line?
I love it, absolutely.
Thank
But
you.
see my point, though,
Yeah,
right?
no,
We're
I do.
concerned
But so
that
here's the
people
thing.
are not going to care about our line if it doesn't exist.
But again, this is the thing. Again, we kind of touched on this. The conservative line is not one and the same with the Republican
Sure.
line, but it has it's more closely associated with the Republican
Absolutely.
line. So people who the conservatives want to find someone who's going to be as closely aligned to them if they don't have a conservative in the race that's
Right.
aligned with them, that has the best chance of winning. And instead of being in like a three-way race sometimes, like for example, my race, I would love to have the libertarian line because I think a three-way race will give you a Brindisi, especially in a close seat.
Mm-hmm.
Now, if it's one of those so-called gerrymandered seats that we talked about in the beginning of the program, where it's going to be Republican or Democrat or whatever, it's going to be Republican, Democrat very clearly, then, that's different in a non-fusion voting state. But in a district like this, a libertarian line could make the difference. I think because the libertarians tend to line up more with the Republicans, it would take votes away from the Republican and you'll end up with the left-wing Democrat, which is what could happen. That's my, that's my experienced political analysis of what I've seen. That you don't want to have, if you're a libertarian, the last thing you want is a socialist government control person on winning that seat.
Okay.
So I think that's what, but if you have someone that's not a government control person, like someone like me who I'm all for less government, and other than maintaining and to be ensuring that we have a public health care system, that's my big issue.
Got it. Is there anything you want to talk about? We got a couple minutes left. Anything you want to bring up besides your website?
Yeah, I just want to say, first of all, thank you, and I hope you do run again and consider running, and maybe you'll get the Republican line to go with your libertarian
Possible.
line.
Could happen.
You never know what's going to happen
Could
in
happen.
the future, because I think that the Republican Party is going through a big change. We're starting over. We're starting from scratch, and we need to continue to move in our direction, which is more closely aligned with libertarians. But I would just like to say, where are we? Oh,
We're
okay.
done.
We're done. I just want to say,
Yes.
no, thank you so much. This is like commercial free.
Yes.
But thanks to your listeners and to people for the questions. One of the things about me is I am in this to try to tell the truth, to try to help my constituents, to try to move our country in a better direction, my community. And I've done it at great sacrifice. I've had $34 million spent against me to try to smear and distort who I am and what I stand for. So I really appreciate you having me on the show to be able to honestly talk to people and answer their questions, in ways that I often don't get a chance to do because I get shouted down by, the resist movement.
To be forward, long form podcast is the way of the future. This is the future.
Yeah.
Right. This is particularly the youth. The youth will put this in their headphones and listen while they're on the subway, on the train, the bus, in the car.
Right.
And they'll listen constantly. We get
it's
thousands
interesting.
of listens every single show, thousands upon thousands. So this is
I
the
feel like
future.
I'm in like a bubble though with this headset on. So
All right, well,
am I
guys, thank
yelling?
you so much. I appreciate you guys listening. As always,
Thank
thank
you.
you so much for being here. And, of course, you will see me next week right here on The Sharpe Way.